I want you to picture a scene. It's January 1990. It is freezing cold in upstate New York. We are hovering in a helicopter, looking down at a bridge over Salmon Creek.
Right.
And standing there, just looking down into this icy water, is a heavy-set, middle-aged man. He's not fishing. He's not out for a hike.
No.
He's standing near the site where a woman's body was recently dumped, and he is, well, the reports say he's engaging in a sexual act with himself.
It is just a grotesque image.
Yeah.
And it was, in a very real way, the end of a nightmare. That man on the bridge was Arthur Shawcross.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening a file that frankly makes you want to scream at the history books. This isn't just a true crime story.
No, not at all.
It's a story about a system that failed so catastrophically that Dr. Michael H. Stone, and this is a guy who literally wrote the book The Anatomy of Evil at Columbia University, he called this case one of the most egregious examples of the unwarranted release of a prisoner.
That quote has stuck with me since we started researching this. Egregious. Unwarranted. Because that's really the core of what we're talking about today. We aren't just looking at the Genesee River Killer and his crimes, although, we have to go there.
We do.
But we're really looking at this specific moment in time where the legal system, the mental health system, and the prison system all looked at a known child killer and said, yeah, he's probably fine to go back outside.
It sounds impossible when you say it like that. It sounds like a line from a bad movie, but it happened. Arthur Shawcross killed 2 children in 1972. He was released in 1987. And then he killed at least 11 more women.
At least 11.
So today's mission, our mission for you, is to figure out how. How does a guy with a rap sheet that terrifying at Chrysides talk his way out of prison? How does the architecture of a liar, as you called it, work?
And where is that line? I mean, where do we draw the line between a brain that is physically broken and a mind that is just purely evil?
That's the big one. We've got a massive stack of sources for this deep dive. We're pulling from trial transcripts, the works of the legendary FBI profiler Robert Ressler, some incredible investigations by Jack Olson, and medical reports that get into the literal gray matter of the brain.
Yeah, the neurology of it is fascinating and deeply unsettling.
So buckle up. This is a heavy one, but we need to understand it because, honestly, the loopholes he exploited, I'm not convinced they're all closed. Let's start at the beginning, the origin story.
Or as I call it, the construction of the mask.
Right. Arthur John Shawcross, born in 1945 in Kittery, Maine, but really grew up in Watertown, New York. If we look at his childhood, are we seeing the classic bad seed signs, the ones we always hear about?
We are seeing what forensic psychologists used to call, and still debate pretty heavily, the McDonald triad.
Okay, pause there. I've heard this term thrown around in TV shows all the time, the triad. What is it actually? What does it mean?
So back in 1963, a psychiatrist named J.M. McDonald proposed this theory. He said that if you see 3 specific behaviors in a child, it's a strong predictor of future violent, maybe even homicidal tendencies.
And the 3 are?
1, cruelty to animals. 2, an obsession with fire setting. And 3, enuresis, which is the clinical term for chronic bedwetting, well past the age where a child should have stopped.
And Shawcross had these.
He hit the jackpot on the bedwetting. The sources indicate he was wetting the bed well into his teenage years. Now, we have to be really careful here.
Okay.
Bedwetting on its own doesn't make someone a serial killer. Of course not. It can be biological, it can be stress-related, but you have to think about the context of the 1950s.
Oh, the shame. Absolutely. His mother would have been scrubbing sheets, maybe shaming him directly. The other kids, if they found out, would be relentless.
Exactly. It creates this intense internal cycle of humiliation and rage. You feel powerless over your own body, so you start looking for ways to exert power over others, and Shawcross did that. He was a bully. Known for it at school. He had these violent, sudden outbursts. He was a big kid, so he could intimidate people. And eventually, he just dropped out of high school in 1960. He couldn't function in that kind of social structure.
Now, speaking of his childhood, and this is where it gets really murky, we have to address the elephant in the room. The abuse claims. Shawcross later told psychiatrists some just horrific stories about his mother, Bessie.
Right. And they are truly awful. He claimed that starting at age 7, his mother forced him into oral sex. He also claimed he had sexual relations with his sister later on.
Okay, the big question, do we believe him?
This is, I think, the first major lesson for you as a listener today.
Yeah.
The skepticism of the self-reporter. When you are dealing with a diagnosed psychopath, you have to realize that they view their own history as a tool. It's a weapon. It's a shield.
So the past isn't something that happened to him, it's something he uses.
Precisely. Did the abuse happen? It's possible. I mean, dysfunctional homes absolutely breed violence and trauma. But psychopathy experts often point out that these offenders learned very, very quickly that I was abused is a get-out-of-jail-free card. It generates sympathy. It provides a reason for their darkness.
So he might have been retrofitting his own history to make himself look like a victim, not a predator.
It's a classic deflection. Don't look at what I did, look at what was done to me. And this pattern of inventing a narrative to suit his needs, I mean, it just exploded when he went to Vietnam.
Oh, the war stories. This part is just wild. He gets drafted in 1967. He's 21 years old. He goes to Vietnam. And if you listen to Arthur Shawcross talk at a bar in the 1980s, you'd think he was the inspiration for Rambo.
He was telling people he was this elite jungle fighter. He claimed he was on long-range reconnaissance patrols. He claimed he beheaded mama sans, local Vietnamese women, and nailed their heads to trees as warnings to the Viet Cong.
He also claimed he engaged in cannibalism, right? To survive in the jungle.
Yes. Cannibalism, mutilation, you name it. He painted himself as this blood-soaked warrior who had seen and done the absolute unspeakable. A broken man, a victim of the war.
But the reality was a little more mundane.
Mundane is the perfect word.
Yeah.
We have his service records.
Yeah.
Robert Ressler pulled him for the trial. He was in the 4th Supply and Transport Company.
So he was a clerk, a logistics guy. He was moving boxes.
He was a supply guy. He wasn't out in the bush hunting the Viet Cong with a knife in his teeth. He was, likely moving crates, filling out forms, working in a depot well behind the front lines.
So why the lies? I mean, that's a huge, huge gap. Peeling potatoes versus beheading people. What's the psychological function of that?
It's what some profilers call the persona of dangerousness. Shawcross was a physically imposing guy, sure, but deep down he was that insecure bedwetting kid. He felt inadequate. By inventing these atrocities, he commanded fear and respect. Nobody messes with the guy who claims he ate people in Vietnam.
And you have to remember the era, too.
Yes, absolutely. Late 60s, early 70s, the culture was just flooded with images of the damaged vet.
Taxi driver, the deer hunter, all those stories coming back.
Exactly. The public was primed to believe that Vietnam turned good men into monsters. Shawcross just stepped into a role that society had already written for him. He knew that if he said, I saw terrible things, people would back off. They'd say, oh, it's the war, poor guy. It was the perfect camouflage for the real monster that was growing inside him.
But while he was faking the combat trauma, the real deviant behavior, the stuff from the McDonald Triad, was actually starting to show up in his official records. He gets stationed at Fort Sill in Oklahoma after his tour, and he starts setting fires.
The second part of the Triad, fire setting. And this wasn't just, a prank. An Army psychiatrist actually flagged this. He sat down with Shawcross's second wife, Linda, and told her that her husband, Arthur, derives sexual arousal from setting fires.
Wait, sexual arousal? From arson? How does that work?
It's a paraphilia called pyrophilia. It's rare, but it happens. For a man who feels inadequate and powerless, fire is the ultimate power. It's total destruction. You strike one tiny match and you can watch something huge and powerful burn to the ground. For some people, that rush of dominance, of control, becomes sexualized.
So he gets discharged, the marriage falls apart, he's back in New York in Clayton, and he starts acting out for real, burglary, arson, and he lands in prison for the first time.
Sentenced to 5 years at Attica. A serious sentence. But, and here is the very first crack in the system that we see, he only serves 22 months.
Less than 2 years on a 5-year sentence. Why? Was it overcrowding? Good behavior?
It was partially good behavior, but there was a specific, very dramatic incident, a prison riot. And in the middle of the chaos, Shawcross, the inmate, actually helped rescue a correctional officer who was being attacked.
Okay, that sounds heroic. I mean, on the surface, that looks like a man who has a moral compass.
It does, doesn't it? And that's exactly what the parole board thought. They looked at that file and said, look, he saved a guard. He's one of the good ones. He's reformed.
But you're skeptical.
Let's look at it through the lens of a master manipulator. Shawcross knows how to play the game. What's the one thing you can do as an inmate that will get you the most positive attention? Saving a CO. It buys you incredible capital inside the walls, and especially with the parole board. Was it altruism? Or was it a calculated psychopathic move to get out early?
Given his later history, it feels like a calculation.
It's hard to see it any other way. So he's out. It's October 1971. He's back in his hometown of Watertown. He gets a job at the Public Works Department. He gets married again for a third time. On paper, it looks like he's trying to go straight.
But the mask is slipping. And this brings us to Section 2 of our deep dive. The first wave of killings.
This is where it all goes dark.
May 7th, 1972. A 10-year-old boy named Jack Owen Blake goes missing.
He was just a local kid. Shawcross apparently lured him into the woods, promising to show him something interesting, and he just vanished. The police had nothing. No body, no weapon, no witnesses. Just a missing boy and a town in panic.
And while the town is freaking out, searching the woods, putting up flyers for Jack, September rolls around, Labor Day weekend. A little girl, Karen Ann Hill, just 8 years old, is visiting Watertown with her mom.
And Shawcross intercepts her. He takes her under a bridge, he rapes her, and he murders her.
He was caught almost immediately for that one, right? The evidence was pretty clear.
Yes, he was arrested the very next day. And once he was in custody for the murder of Karen Hill, the dominoes fell. Information came to light that led investigators to Jack Blake's body. So now, the police have a guy who has confessed to killing 2 children in the span of just 4 months.
This is the moment where I think every single person listening is going to get angry. Because in a sane world, this is where the story of Arthur Shawcross, the killer, ends.
It should have been.
You kill 2 kids, you go to prison, you never ever come out. Maybe you get the death penalty, which New York had at the time. Maybe you get life without parole. But that is absolutely not what happened.
No. Enter the district attorney, a man named William McCluskey.
Okay, let's try to get inside his head. I'm the DA. I have a confession for the Blake killing. I have rock-solid evidence for the Hill killing. This should be a slam dunk. Why on earth am I even thinking about offering a plea bargain?
Because you are terrified of one specific legal defense. Extreme emotional disturbance.
Explain that I'm a jury member from 1972. What does that mean?
Okay, so in 1972 New York law, murder is the intentional killing of another person. Simple enough. But the law had this loophole, this affirmative defense, if the defense attorney could prove that the killer acted under an extreme emotional disturbance. Basically, a temporary break from reality, a crime of passion, an uncontrollable urge that a reasonable person might also feel in that situation.
A seeing red defense.
That's a good way to put it. If they could convince the jury of that, the jury could be instructed to downgrade the charge from murder to manslaughter.
And manslaughter carries a much, much lighter sentence.
Infinitely lighter.
Yeah.
So the DA, McCluskey, he looked at Arthur Shawcross. He looked at the Vietnam stories, which, remember, everyone still believed were true at this point. He looked at the abused childhood narrative that Shawcross was already spinning.
The whole damaged vet persona.
Exactly. And McCluskey thought, if I put this guy in front of a jury of his peers from Watertown, his lawyer's going to cry PTSD, he's going to talk about the horrors of war, the jury's going to feel sorry for this war hero, and they're going to give him manslaughter anyway.
So he was afraid of losing the murder conviction at trial, so he preempted the jury and offered manslaughter himself.
He thought he was taking the safe bet. He offered Shawcross a deal, plead guilty to manslaughter for both deaths, and we won't even try for murder. We'll just put you away.
And Shawcross obviously takes the deal. What was the sentence for 2 counts of first-degree manslaughter?
An indeterminate term with a maximum of 25 years.
25 years for 2 children. That's 12 and a half years per child. And that's the maximum. He's eligible for parole long before that.
It was a complete judicial collapse. I mean,
Yeah.
technically, legally, you could argue the DA followed the rules. He used the tools available to him, and he secured a conviction. But morally, for the community, it was an absolute disaster.
It essentially told Shawcross that he could manipulate the narrative about his past, and he could get a slap on the wrist.
It validated his entire worldview. The world is a game, and he knows how to play it. So he goes away. He's in Attica, then Greenhaven. He serves 14 years. It's now 1987. He's up for parole.
And this is Section 3, the release. This is where the bureaucracy actually kills people.
He's just one failure after another.
Okay, so he's been inside for 14 years. There had to be doctors looking at him, right? You don't just let a child killer out without a full psychiatric evaluation.
Oh, there were evaluations, multiple ones.
Yeah.
And they were terrifying. The psychiatrists who evaluated Shawcross in the years leading up to his parole hearing labeled him a schizoid psychopath.
We mentioned that term earlier. Can we break that down a bit more? We know what a psychopath is. No empathy, manipulative, callous. But what does the schizoid part add to that?
Schizoid, in this context, refers to a personality type that is cold, aloof, detached from social relationships, and deeply solitary. They're loners. So you have a person who doesn't just lack empathy for others.
The psychopath part.
Right. They also have absolutely no desire for human connection. They are totally detached from the emotional reality of other human beings. It's a double whammy of dangerousness. The doctors were essentially screaming in the reports, "This man is a loaded gun. Do not let him out."
So if the doctors are screaming no, who in their right mind is saying yes?
The prison administration, the parole board, the social workers.
Well, why? On what grounds?
Because inside the highly structured environment of a maximum security prison, Arthur Shawcross was a good inmate. He followed the rules. He didn't start fights. He did his chores. He was polite to the guards. The social workers and the parole board, who weren't trained psychiatrists, looked at his behavioral record inside the walls and said, "Look, he's reformed. He's no longer dangerous to society."
That is just maddening. Being good in a cage doesn't mean you won't bite when the cage is opened. A tiger can be calm in a zoo. It's still a tiger.
That is the fundamental disconnect. A smart psychopath is often a great prisoner. They know the rules. They know how to manipulate staff. They know what to say. The social workers saw a compliant, middle-aged man. The psychiatrist saw a predator in hibernation. The system listened to the social workers.
So in April 1987, the gates open. Arthur Shawcross is a free man.
And this leads to one of the most disturbing sequences in the entire story, a dynamic that criminologists now refer to as pass the trash.
This sounds like a bad game show, but it's actually a real-world policy.
Effectively, yes. So Shawcross is released. His parole officer tries to settle him and bring him to New York. But guess what? This is 1987. There's no internet, but word still gets out.
Well,
The local paper runs a story. The child killer is moving in next door.
the neighbors must have gone nuclear. I know I would.
They did. Protests on his lawn, threats. Local employers refused to hire him. So the parole department says, okay, this isn't working, and they move him. He moves to Delhi, New York. Same thing happens. The community rises up, completely hostile. He moves to Fleischmann's. Same exact thing.
So he's just bouncing around, this radioactive person nobody wants.
And instead of the parole department saying, hey, this instability is incredibly dangerous for a man like this, maybe we need to put him in a secure halfway house or revoke his parole, they just kept shuffling him.
Pass the trash, get him out of my jurisdiction, and make him someone else's problem.
Exactly. And in June 1987, the parole officer makes the final fatal mistake. He moves Shawcross and his new girlfriend, a woman named Rosemarie Wally, to a transient hotel in Rochester, New York.
Rochester, a big city, anonymous.
A big city with a lot of people. And here is the kicker, the single most unbelievable failure in his whole chain. The parole officer did not notify the Rochester Police Department.
Wait, stop. So the Rochester PD has a paroled double child killer, a diagnosed schizoid psychopath dropped into their city, living in a transient hotel right downtown, and nobody sent them a memo.
Not a single phone call. Not one memo. As far as Rochester law enforcement was concerned, Arthur Shawcross didn't exist. He was invisible. He was effectively unsupervised in a brand new, target-rich hunting ground. By October, he had his own apartment on Alexander Street. He was buying a car. He was settling in.
And the clock was ticking down to zero.
It didn't take long. March 1988, the Genesee River murders begin.
And this is section 4. The profile of the victims changes here. He's not grabbing kids off the street anymore.
No, he evolved. Or devolved, depending on how you look at it. He started targeting sex workers.
Why the switch? Is it about risk?
It's all about vulnerability and access. Shawcross was a predator of opportunity. In the transient areas of Rochester, sex workers were accessible. They would get into a car with a stranger willingly. And tragically, he knew that society pays far less attention when a sex worker goes missing compared to when a schoolchild vanishes.
He was banking on the less dead phenomenon, the idea that some victims are seen as less valuable by society and the police.
He absolutely was. It was a cold, cruel calculation.
We need to acknowledge the scale of this. This wasn't one or two isolated incidents. This was a spree.
It was a storm of violence. Dorothy Blackland, Anna Marie Steffen, Dorothy Keeler, Patricia Ives, June Stott, Marie Welsh, Frances Brown, Kimberly Logan, Elizabeth Gibson, who was killed over in Wayne County, Darlene Trippi, and finally, June Cicero.
That is 11 women. 11 leaves.
11 convictions. He's suspected in at least one more. And most of them were found in or near the Genesee River Gorge.
So bodies are turning up. The city must have been terrified. Why didn't the police connect the dots faster? I mean, if you find 3 bodies in the same river, isn't that pretty much the definition of a serial killer?
You would think so. But this brings us to a really fascinating and tragic concept that Detective Robert Keppel, who consulted on the Ted Bundy case, later critiqued heavily. It's called the modus operandi trap, or linkage blindness.
How does that work? How can you be blind to a pattern that seems so obvious from the outside?
Police are trained to look for patterns
Hmm.
for his signature. The killer always uses a .22 caliber. The killer always ties the hands with a specific type of square knot. The killer always leaves the body facing north. They look for consistency because that's what links the crimes.
Okay.
But Shawcross, he was messy. He was inconsistent.
In what way?
Sometimes he strangled his victims. Sometimes he beat them to death. Sometimes he left the body right where he killed them. Other times he'd transport it and hide it in the river. One victim was a different age profile. Another was found in a different county. Because the crime scenes looked so different, the detectives running the task force thought they were dealing with different killers.
So they were looking for a group of bad guys or multiple separate murderers because they couldn't believe one guy was doing all of this in different ways.
Exactly. They were looking for a perfect, neat pattern in a chaotic, ugly reality. And because of that, Shawcross slipped through the cracks of their investigation for almost 2 years, killing again and again.
And finally, it wasn't some high-tech DNA test or brilliant Sherlock Holmes-style deduction that caught him. It was just a helicopter.
Back to our opening image, January 4th, 1990. The police are doing routine aerial surveillance of the remote areas where bodies have been found, just seeing if anything looked out of place. They fly over the Salmon Creek Bridge in the town of Parma, and they see a Chevy Celebrity parked there.
Shawcross's car?
And they see this heavy-set man standing on the bridge. He's looking down at the ice. And he appears to be either urinating or masturbating over the edge.
It's such a bizarre, risky thing to do. Why go back to the scene of the crime like that?
It's a classic part of the serial killer cycle. It's called totem behavior. They return to the dump sites to relive the fantasy, to feel that sense of power and ownership over the victim again. June Cicero's body was down there, frozen in the ice. He was, in his twisted mind, visiting her.
So the helicopter crew saw this, thought it was suspicious, and ran the plates.
They ran the plates. It came back to Arthur John Shawcross, and suddenly someone in the Rochester Police Department pulled his file and realized, oh my God, we have a guy living here who killed 2 kids in Watertown in 1972. The pieces finally, catastrophically, clicked into place. He was arrested on January 5th.
But the story doesn't end with the handcuffs. That's Section 5, the trial. Because Shawcross didn't just confess and say, you got me. He went for the ultimate gambit, the insanity defense.
And this trial became a heavyweight championship fight of forensic psychiatry. It was really wild.
On one side, the defense brought in the famous Dr. Dorothy Lewis. She's a legend in this field, right?
An absolute pioneer. She was one of the first to seriously study the link between childhood abuse, brain damage, and violent offenders. She examined Shawcross, and she came into court with a laundry list of diagnoses: brain damage, PTSD from his combat in Vietnam, and most controversially, multiple personality disorder, what we now call dissociative identity disorder, or DID.
And she introduced the jury to Bessie.
Bessie. Dr. Lewis testified that Arthur Shawcross didn't kill those 11 women. She claimed that when Arthur was under extreme stress, he dissociated, and a female alter ego named Bessie, pointedly named after his abusive mother, took over his body. And Bessie was the one who was full of rage, vengeful, and violent.
That is a hell of a story to tell a jury. It wasn't me, it was the angry lady living in my head.
It was a very clear bid for institutionalization, not prison. If the jury believed Bessie did it, then Arthur wasn't legally responsible. He'd go to a secure mental hospital, not a supermax prison.
But the prosecution was not having any of it. Who did they bring in to counter that?
They brought in the 2 biggest guns they could find: Robert Ressler from the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit and the renowned forensic psychiatrist Dr. Park Dietz.
Ressler is the guy who basically invented modern criminal profiling. He interviewed Bundy, Gacy, all of them.
Correct. And Ressler went straight for the jugular. He went for the Vietnam lies. He got Shawcross's service record admitted into evidence. He got on the stand and told the jury, point blank, this man is not suffering from combat PTSD because he never saw combat. He completely dismantled the foundation of the trauma narrative. He showed the jury that Shawcross was a pathological liar, plain and simple.
And what about Dr. Dietz? How did he handle the Bessie theory?
Dietz attacked it head on. He interviewed Shawcross for hours. He diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder, or ASPD.
Which means, in layman's terms,
It means he's not insane. He isn't out of touch with reality. He knows right from wrong. He just doesn't care. He chooses wrong because it feels good and serves his needs. Dietz argued that Bessie was just another con, another performance. He suggested Shawcross was mimicking symptoms he'd seen in movies like Civil or heard about from other inmates. It was another manipulation.
But wait, there was actual physical evidence of brain problems, right? This wasn't just a battle of psychobabble.
Yes, and this is where you, the listener, need to really pay attention because this complicates everything and makes it so much more interesting. Dr. Lewis's team conducted brain scans, and they found two significant abnormalities.
What were they?
First, they found a cyst, a small growth that was pressing on his temporal lobe. And second, they found evidence of scarring on his frontal lobes.
We hear about the frontal lobe all the time in these cases. Why is that specific part of the brain so important?
Think of the frontal lobe as the CEO of your brain. It's the part right behind your forehead that's responsible for executive function, decision-making, long-term planning, morality, and most importantly, inhibition and impulse control. It's the part that says, don't punch that guy, or don't steal that car, or don't act on that violent urge.
Like the famous Phineas Gage case from the 1800s.
The perfect analogy. Phineas Gage was the railroad worker who had a metal tamping rod shot straight through his frontal lobe. He survived, but his personality completely changed. He went from a nice, responsible, well-liked guy to a rude, impulsive, profane jerk. The defense argued that Arthur Shawcross was a modern Phineas Gage, that the scarring meant he literally could not stop his violent impulses.
That's a terrifying philosophical question. If your brain is physically broken, are you evil or are you just a broken machine? Are your actions a choice or a symptom?
It is the ultimate question of neurolaw, and it's something courts are still grappling with today. But the jury in 1991 had to make a practical decision. Did the cyst and the scarring make him rape and murder 11 women? Or did Arthur Shawcross, the man who lied about Vietnam, who manipulated the parole board, who hid bodies, make a choice?
What was the verdict?
Guilty. They didn't buy the Bessie defense. They didn't buy the brain damage excuse. They saw him as a manipulator. They convicted him of 11 counts of second-degree murder and other related charges.
And the sentence?
250 years to life. Effectively, life without parole. He was never getting out again.
So he's locked up forever this time. The story should be over. But he had one last grotesque card to play. We have to talk about the 2003 interview.
Yeah, this is the final disturbing chapter. This was with Catherine English, a British journalist who was doing a documentary on cannibalism. Shawcross is an old man now. He's in a wheelchair. He's frail.
Yeah.
But he sees a camera, and the performer, the manipulator, turns right back on.
What did he say?
He confessed to something new, something he'd never mentioned to the police or at trial. He claimed in graphic detail that he had sliced out and eaten the vulvae of 3 of his female victims.
Oh, my God.
It's just revolting. But here is the fascinating psychological twist. The interviewer then asked him about Jack Blake, his very first victim, the little boy, back in '72. Shawcross had at one point claimed he ate Blake's genitals too. But in his 2003 interview, he clammed up. He refused to talk about it.
Why? Why admit to eating the women but suddenly go silent about the boy?
Control. It's all about control. He gives her a new, shocking nugget here, but he withholds this other nugget there. He wanted to keep the reporter and the world dancing to his tune, even locked in a cell, rotting away. He needed to be the puppet master. He needed to prove he was still in charge of his own horrific narrative.
So was the cannibalism claim even true?
Who knows? And in a way, it doesn't matter. With Shawcross, truth and lies were blended into a poisonous smoothie. It might have been true, or it might have been just another Vietnam story. A shocking lie designed to get attention and cement his legacy as the ultimate monster.
He finally died in 2008.
November 10th, 2008. He complained of leg pains, was taken to Albany Medical Center, and died of cardiac arrest. He was 63 years old, and the world became a slightly safer place.
So we've unpacked a lot here. The bedwetting arsonist, the Vietnam lies, the catastrophic plea bargain, the parole failure, the linkage blindness, the battle of the experts, the brain cyst. When you look at this entire horrifying mess, what is the big takeaway? This so what?
For me, it comes down to the danger of what I call administrative arrogance.
Just say more about that. What do you mean by that?
We had experts. We had trained psychiatrists who looked at this man and used big, scary, accurate words. Schizoid psychopath. They wrote reports to warn us. And a system of bureaucrats and social workers may be worried about overcrowding or just ticking boxes on a form, or maybe they genuinely believe in giving a guy a second chance. They overruled the science.
They prioritize the process over the person.
Exactly. They prioritize their administrative procedure over the clear, explicit warnings of the medical professionals. And because of that one administrative decision, to sign that one piece of paper, 11 women died who did not have to.
It's a chilling lesson in the importance of listening to the red flags, even when it's inconvenient.
And it leaves us, as you said, with that lingering, uncomfortable question about biology. We can hate Arthur Shawcross, and we should for his actions. But that cyst in his brain was real. That scarring on his frontal lobes was real.
It's the uncomfortable final thought for you to chew on. How many other people are walking around with frontal lobe scarring right now from a childhood injury or a fever? And what stops them from becoming Arthur Shawcross?
Maybe it's a good family. Maybe it's a lack of other risk factors. Maybe it's just luck. Or maybe, and this is what you have to hope, some people just choose to be good no matter what their brain looks like on a scan.
That is a thought that's definitely going to keep me up tonight.
Me too.
Thank you for listening to this deep dive. It was a dark one, but hopefully it shed some important light on how these cracks in the system form and what can crawl out of them.
Stay safe out there.
Yeah.
And trust your instincts.
We'll see you next time.